Chapter 19. A village like no other. And you're saying that my caseload chased me out of the country? In the hours that followed their departure from Fontanarosa, Dan could not stop admiring the landscape until they reached the foothills of the mountain range they had just traversed. The sandy ground and sparse vegetation indicated a change in climate and weather condition. It was as if someone had divided the land in two parts, one lush and green, the other lifeless and arid. Why would anyone build a village on such a high and infertile ground? Gustavo wondered aloud, poking his head out of the window as they were arriving in sight of Castelnuovo di Conza. Perhaps it was to observe the invaders from afar before they could reach one's front stoop, Damianos replied. They sure achieved that, Dan remarked with a smirk on his lips. This is truly a village perched in an eagle's nest. But why the isolation, though? Gustavo queried. It's not as if they had field 10 miles around or vineyards to grow on the hillside. There's nothing on this mountain. What do people do for a living here? Dan asked. Many work in bands in the vineyards in the valley, and others have professional positions such as doctors and lawyers. Lawyers? Dan's voice was tainted with mockery. What would they need with a lawyer all the way up here? Well, perhaps a lawyer is not exactly the definition I should use. They have a advocate, a man who settles differences between feuding parties. And who would that be? Dan asked. You are, was Damianos' two-word answer. The grin on his lips left no doubt in his companion's mind that he found this announcement quite amusing. Eyes riveted on the shepherd, Dan said, I'm the advocate in this town. Is that what you're saying? Yes, Dan, and your caseload is probably the main reason for which you will decide to leave Italy. Why? Was I running away from some avenging murderer who's after my hide? Perhaps we shall discuss this in some detail when we get to yours and Gustavo's house. You mean I live with Dan? Yes, you do, Gustavo, but don't worry. You won't be living on top of each other like you did once in Key West. This house is rather large and comfortable. I'm sure you won't have any problem with space. Do we have a housekeeper or a cook or somebody to help around the house? Dan was worried that he and Gustavo would have to get used to not only cooking but to fetching provisions and cleaning the premises. Oh yes, Selina is the older woman looking after housekeeping and cooking, and her son Giuseppe looks after the heavy chores or driving your carriage around the province to see your clients. That sounds like a large household for a country lawyer, Gustavo remarked. And what am I doing to pass the time? Well, you are helping Generoso with the accounts and ensuring that he gets paid for his services. Gustavo raised both eyebrows. You mean I'm the enforcer, the bad guy? Not really. In reality, you love the job because it allows you to visit people, enjoy the freedom the work gives you, and you appreciate the invitations to dinner once in a while. Yeah, that sounds certainly attractive enough. The three men fell silent for a moment before Dan said, And you're saying that my caseload chased me out of the country? Yes, Dan, but it's rather a long story, which I would prefer recounting after we had time to rest from our journey. An hour later, they arrived at the bottom of a rather steep hill where the carriage stopped, and Arnaldo came down from his perch. As soon as the vehicle stopped, Damianos opened the door and stepped out. Will you whistle for Giuseppe to come and fetch the luggage, if you don't mind? Yes, signor, right away, Arnaldo replied, pulling a rather large whistle out of his cloak pocket. At the strident sound he made, half of the street came out on their front stoop to see who had come up the drive. A moment later, a strapping young fellow, the size of a small ape, came running down the hill. Signor Damianos, how are you? He bellowed as soon as he was in earshot of the shepherd. Better now that we have reached our destination, thank you. In the meantime, Dan and Gustavo had alighted from the cab. Signors, Giuseppe said in a more subdued tone of voice. So glad to have you back, signors. How was Salerno? Did you book your passage to the New World? Dan smiled and shook his head. Once again someone, namely Damianos, had organised his life, or past life, that is. I believe Signor Damianos took care of that, Giuseppe, but we will have to confirm the arrangements, I am sure. He looked pointedly at Damianos. Anyway, how have you been? How is your mother? We're both fine, signor. Mum has been cooking all morning, and I'm sure you'll have a great meal tonight. That's good to know, Giuseppe, Gustavo said, coming to stand beside Dan. I, for one, ask for nothing else after such a long trip. I know, Signor Vigenti, Giuseppe said. You're always glad to arrive at your destination, to have a good meal, a good bed, and a good wine, as you say to me every time we travel. Good, Damiano said. Let's go to that mill and that bed and that wine then, chuckling in his beard. Selina was also standing on the front stoop of the house. The stone building had been painted a beige colour reminiscent of the soil's own shade. It was inviting from the outside, for it was clean, with the upstairs windows adorned of lace curtains, which added a touch of freshness to the abode. My, Signor Generoso, you look tired, Selina said, wrapping both arms around Dan's chest to give him a big hug. But we'll soon fix that. Don't you worry about a thing. You and Signor Vicente come in and put your feet up. Dinner will be ready as soon as you've washed up. She sounds like my mother, Dan thought and smiled. It's good to be home, Selina, and I'm very grateful for you keeping the house looking so good. Wait till you taste her pasta, Signor, Giuseppe rejoined, bringing the luggage indoors after his mother and the three men had entered the house. The inside was richly but soberly furnished of heavy pinewood furniture over a slate floor. There were a few paintings on the wall, but none were of extraordinary value. The rugs on the floor, the fire in the hearth, and the inviting chairs added to the welcoming feeling one had when walking into the living room. All right, Giuseppe, Selina said with a titter in her voice. You'll get a place too, you know that. No need for flatteries, and before that happens I suggest you get back down the hill and help Ronaldo to the livery, so that he too can rest and have a meal with Gaston. He lifted her gaze to Dan. He's been waiting for your return too, you know. Dan was about to say, no, I don't know, but refrained from doing so. The sooner he would know what was going on in the village, the better he would feel. Once dinner had been put on the table, Dan turned to Damianos. All right, now that our plates are full, our glasses refilled, and our feet are under the table, I'd like to hear about you booking my passage to the New World. After swallowing a mouthful of meat and pasta, Damianos nodded. You know already that your ancestor has left Italy in the early years of the 20th century, and you are also aware that your past cannot be altered. Therefore, I took the liberty last night to book a passage on a Greek vessel that will be in port in Salerno in 2 months. That should give you enough time to sort things out around here. And what sort of things will I be sorting? Dan asked, eating with appetite, it seemed. An affair that concerns Gaston, the liveryman, and will have to be cleared before you leave. What has the fellow done? Gustavo asked between mouthfuls. He's been accused of smuggling goods in the carriages that come from the eastern ports and selling them for a profit before they get into the hands of the buyers. Any evidence of him doing such a thing? No evidence as such, no, Damianos replied, depositing his fork beside his plate before wiping his mouth. So, who's accusing him of such crime? I think you'll need to read the case's documentation in the morning, Dan, to get all of the details. However, I can tell you this. Gaston has been a liveryman and blacksmith in this community for over 20 years. Before that, he helped his father in the stables as a boy. He never had any reasons to smuggle anything. He is now married to a very nice young woman who came from Fontanarosa, where we spent the night yesterday. And she is not one with exigencies that would force a man to risk his work, reputation, and well-being for a few extra coins. So who else could be the culprit, if culprit there is? There are several people on my list, but that list only comprises names of people who have something to gain from smuggling. Each of these men has a motive, but no real opportunity to smuggle anything. And what was smuggled? Gustavo asked. I'm not sure, and no one has been able to give Generoso a straight answer either, but it appears that some cocaine has found its way into some of the wineries. You mean someone is making cocaine wine around here? But it's not illegal, is it? The wine is not illegal, no. As you saw, the Pope himself is drinking it, but the cocaine powder in pure form would be a drug. You would not want to fall into the wrong hands, would you? Dan finished eating his meal, reclined to the back of the chair, and crossed his arms over his chest. And where do you think this cocaine comes from? Rumours have it coming from Turkey or Greece, but again nothing has been confirmed. Damianos drank a little wine after wiping his plate clean with a piece of bread. The problem is that someone found a pouch of cocaine in between the seats of the coach. The person called the police, and there we are. I see, Dan said. But I bet that's not the only thing that Gaston is supposed to have smuggled, is it? Oh no, he's been accused of smuggling anything from shoes to furs to furniture, anything transportable by coach. Yet only the sale of cocaine wine has been verified, and there again, no one has seen Gaston delivering anything like cocaine to any of the winemakers. It's a story based on gossip, but not on facts. And what does Gaston expect me to do? Dan asked. Find the real smuggler. Dan erupted in laughter. Is that it? How could I hope to accomplish this in 2 months' time without any phone or means of communication other than the suspect's own coach? This has been Generoso's problem all along, Dan. He can't seem to find a lead or an ounce of motive that would put Gaston in the clear." "Tell me something, Damianos. In reality, does Generoso ever find out the truth?" Damianos shook his head. "I don't know, Dan. However, it would be plausible to think that he could not clear Gaston and therefore had to leave the region before someone accused him of the theft or blame him for Gaston's imprisonment." "But he had already made up his mind when he went to Salerno on this trip, didn't he? Does that mean he gave up?" "Not necessarily, Dan. It may have been a rule to trap the real culprit into thinking he would be leaving in a couple of months." "Are you saying the booking of a passage was a trap?" "Something of the sort, Gustavo, yes. If the real culprit thought no one would be able to stop him, and Gaston was out of the way, he would resume his criminal activities seemingly unhindered."